I know it's probably a bit weird to keep going down this train, but considering Toy Story 5's release and the explosive success as I predicted, I think we should stroll down memory lane into the dark times. Because generally, Toy Story as a franchise has been consistently successful through its movies, shorts, shows, and even the theme park attractions. The franchise is so well-rounded with broad multi-generational appeal across kids, parents, and nostalgic fans that it feels almost impossible to see it failing. Until you go back and look at Lightyear in 2022. Pixar's major box office disaster that still stings 4 years later. And when you look at how the stats of Toy Story are playing out, financially dominant and critically beloved with Toy Story 5 tracking for the franchise record opening weekend, Toy Story's first major spin-off seems like one of the most baffling choices Pixar or Disney has ever made. We've made videos in the past critiquing Lightyear because of how dull and generic it felt, where the decision to make it Pixar's grand return to theaters post-COVID especially felt short-sighted after years of Disney Plus direct-to-streaming releases that shifted audience habits. The fact of having Turning Red, Luca, and Soul not given the releases they deserve. So today we're going to go back again and look at the movie itself and the broader picture of why it fell so flat, especially compared to why Toy Story line continues to thrive. Lightyear positioned itself as the in-universe film that inspired Andy's Buzz Lightyear toy back in 1995. This is that very movie. And here, Buzz is instead voiced by Chris Evans instead of Tim Allen, being a cocky space ranger who strands his crew, including his best friend, Alicia, on the hostile planet of Tekani Prime. Obsessed with fixing his mistake, he repeatedly tests hyperspace fuel, with each failure costing years of real time. He teams up with the recruits of generations on, including Alicia's granddaughter and this robot cat Socks, while finally battling Zurg and the robot army. And on paper, it had all the ingredients: gorgeous Pixar animation, themes of regret, time, and perseverance, plus a fun supporting cast, where critics were mostly positive, but how it was the worst reviewed Toy Story film to date, and audiences were far more divided, and it never connected the way that Pixar giants usually do. And with that roughly $200 million budget and total cost higher once you factor in marketing, Lightyear just opened to $50 million domestically and limped only to $226 million worldwide, and a loss of over $106 million for Disney, making it one of the weakest theatrical performers by Pixar in the modern era. Several factors did collide exactly at the wrong time. Many families were just so confused or didn't grasp that this wasn't a direct Toy Story sequel or the real Buzz story origin in the way that they expected, and the meta film within a film concept was just tough to sell to trailers, and the absence of Tim Allen created immediate backlash and review bombing. And Disney has already conditioned audiences at that time to expect Pixar on Disney Plus so quickly, so excitement wasn't really there for a spin-off theatrical return, and opened against big juggernauts of films during that time, splitting family and audiences in a tough summer marketplace. And for so many viewers, it felt simply like a generic sci-fi action pick rather than an essential Pixar heart. Some side characters just came off as annoying, especially Taika Waititi, and the middle dragged and didn't deeply explore or honor the Buzz or Zurg lore that fans loved. It was an original story just spun off to explain Andy's toy, and just never justified its own existence. And some people worried Lightyear's poor reception would damage the broader franchise or hurt Toy Story 5, but that fear actually never materialized as we see now. The real impact was on Pixar's confidence with originals and spin-offs. The movie just forced a big rethink where you can't just make something just because it involves Buzz Lightyear. You need to deliver the magic audiences expect from the brand, not just leveraging the IP. That's why exactly 4 years later, during the time of Toy Story 5, we're exploring the lessons of Lightyear and what Pixar learned from that misstep. After the major success of Toy Story 4 in 2019, which grossed over $1 billion worldwide and gave many fans what felt like a heartfelt send-off to Woody's arc, Pixar and Disney were just riding that high on the franchise's enduring popularity. The film proved there was still huge demand for these beloved characters, even after 3 movies already felt like they were perfect conclusions. But behind the scenes, things were shifting because COVID-19 hit, and the films that they wanted to release, like Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, were straight to streaming. This kept Pixar's content flowing to subscribers, but it also changed the expectations. Enter Lightyear, announced late 2020. This spin-off was positioned as Pixar's big return to the big screen, the first theatrical film since Onward in early 2020. And this came from the idea of director Angus MacLane, a longtime Pixar artist and sci-fi fan who saw it as a passion project. And the goal was to create the real Buzz Lightyear movie that Andy would have wanted to watch in 1995 that inspired the toy. It wasn't meant to be another Toy Story entry focused on the toy himself, but the standalone action-adventure origin story for the human space ranger hero. And that's why they went with the angle to cast others like Chris Evans to fit the more realistic, distinct feel that this film inspired the toy. For Pixar and Disney, this seemed like a smart move on multiple levels. It leveraged one of the strongest IPs without needing the full main cast or continuing the core Toy Story. It gave Buzz his own main spotlight in a high-concept sci-fi package that would appeal to older kids and adults who love space adventures. And in the post-pandemic world, tying it to the massive popular Toy Story brand felt like a safe way to draw crowds back to theaters while expanding the universe. And of course, producer Galen Sussman pushed the team hard for the theatrical release, believing the action and visuals deserved that experience. And at the time, it did make sense as a bridge. Keep the franchise momentum going, test the waters for more spin-offs or originals, and remind everyone why Pixar was the king of animation. But looking back on it now, especially with Toy Story 5 crushing it, you can see how this decision carried hidden risks and was not the right move at all. They were banking on the Buzz Lightyear name alone to carry a film that wasn't really a Toy Story movie the way fans expected, right at the moment when the audience habits were still in flux, where after a pandemic, people were becoming more picky at the time. And afterwards, unfortunately, because of those effects, we all knew the producer Galen Sussman, who worked on Toy Story 2, and of course director Angus, would later get laid off by Pixar in 2023 because of these disasters that were piling up for Disney. But let's now talk about the idea of Lightyear itself and why it was such a big problem. At its core, the movie sells itself as a big-budget sci-fi film that young Andy watched in 1995, the one that made him obsessed enough to beg for a Buzz Lightyear toy. That's a fun meta look on paper, but once you sit down and watch, the concept starts to crumble under its own weight. The plot is surprisingly dull and narrow for a Pixar film, where Buzz strands the entire colony ship on an alien planet because he ignored protocol and pushed too far on a risky maneuver. Then the movie just becomes this long, repetitive cycle of him trying to perfect hyperspace fuel, failing time and time again, and time jumping forward years each time, missing out on his best friend's life or his own life, watching people age while he stays the same. It's a story about regret, isolation, and learning to rely on a team instead of being a lone hero. Those are very decent themes, but they feel very small and introspective for what's supposed to be this epic, inspirational space adventure that would captivate a kid like Andy and it spark an entire toy line. Plus, this plot is something that already the real Buzz, as we know him in the Toy Story franchise, has already dealt with when everyone works as a team. He actually becomes leader in Toy Story 2 and goes along this adventure, which fits the message, but in a film like this, it just falls flat. And instead of delivering the flashy heroic Space Ranger action you expect from him, that the movie Buzz is from, we get a lot of Buzz moping around a planet, running test flights, and dealing with interpersonal drama. The supporting recruits are hit or miss. Some viewers found them more annoying than endearing, especially compared to the tight, memorable ensemble in the main Toy Story films, even the small ones that have hardly any lines. But of course, the main gripes that we have talked about time and time again was the main villain reveal, where Zurg turned out to be a future version of Buzz Lightyear who went too far down the time travel rabbit hole that felt like a twist that undercuts the mythic bad guy that everyone grew up with, classic Zurg. As we all know, Zurg, even introduced in Toy Story 2, was this larger-than-life evil emperor toy rival to Buzz Lightyear, who was evil for the sake of being evil in that over-the-top antagonism. And now turning him into the sad future version of Buzz Lightyear who made bad choices just makes everything feel smaller, more personal, and frankly less exciting for kids who wanted the cool space battles and clear good versus evil vibes. And that was the entire point of series like Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. Zurg is evil, Buzz is good. That is the purpose of Star Command and the Galactic Alliance. Where nothing this movie showed to us compared to the movie version that we known in the Toy Story franchise even matches up for one single second. How can this Buzz and Zurg from the film match what we see on screen for the entire storyline? Like, what does it say when Zurg says to Buzz, "I am your father"? I mean, your father turns out to be yourself from the future seems pretty weird. Why is he acting this way to himself? It doesn't make sense. This also diluted what the Toy Story series always provided brilliantly to Buzz's character. In the main films, Buzz is this delusional, overconfident toy who thinks he's a real space ranger. His arc is deeply about accepting his identity as a toy while still embracing that heroic spirit. He's funny, aspirational, and deeply tied to the heart of friendship and play. And here we get that serious human version who's competent but flawed in a very adult version. It's an interesting deconstruction, but it feels like it doesn't add to the magic of the toy's world. If anything, it makes the in-universe inspiration for the toy feel less wondrous and more bland. Would a kid watch this fairly somber, time loop regretting story and immediately run out begging for the action figure? Not really. It's just hard to picture compared to the lighter, more adventurous tone of something like old Buzz Lightyear of Star Command cartoon. The bigger issue is how this narrow focus made the whole project feel unnecessary. Toy Story has always succeeded because it balances emotional depth with broader entertainment, toyetic energetic, fun, and universal themes about growing up, friendship, and change. Lightyear also tried to be a prestige sci-fi action that was both connected to the franchise and completely separated from it, and it ended up satisfying neither the die-hard fans nor the casual families looking for a fun summer movie. It was a bold swing that highlights that not every good idea needs to be made, especially when you're leaning so heavily on an existing IP. That creative and conceptual misfire is what made the box office disappointment sting even more, and why it's part of the lessons Pixar has seemed to internalize by the time they got to today with Toy Story 5. And now let's compare why the main Toy Story series keeps working so well while the Lightyear spin-off just didn't land with audiences at the time. The difference here is that the heart of Toy Story has always been about more than cool toys or space rangers. It's about friendship, identity, growing up, and finding purpose in a world that wasn't built for you. Whether it's Woody's fear about being replaced, the toys learning to finally let Andy go, or the emotional gut punches in later films, every story feels deeply human even though the characters are plastic. The emotional core wrapped in a bright, colorful, impossible world brought to life through Pixar's unmatched animation and heartfelt connections is what made the franchise feel timeless. Audiences invested into it because they care about these characters and see pieces of themselves in their struggle. And just looking at the numbers right now, Toy Story 5 is on pace for a massive opening weekend between up to $175 million domestically within 3 days. That means its opening weekend alone is projected to nearly match or even surpass Lightyear's entire domestic run of $118 million and could challenge and exceed Lightyear's full worldwide total of $226 million in a single frame for the entire worldwide box office. Something that proves the power of staying true to the series, and proves that Lightyear did not affect the broader picture of Toy Story. And Toy Story 5 is tracking to potentially outperform even Toy Story 4 financially, showing the franchise still has the magic when it delivers what audiences love. Families keep coming back because the toys deliver joy, nostalgia, and real emotional payoff each time. And contrast that with Lightyear. The spin-off completely forgoes the original Buzz Lightyear we know and love from the Toy Story movies. The delusional toy who thinks he's a real space ranger, but still is fun. This version of Buzz is the aspirational one that is full of heart. Even the earlier Buzz Lightyear Star Command cartoon captured that energetic, larger-than-life space ranger spirit with a classic over-the-top Zurg as his arch nemesis. It leaned into the fun, toyetic nature that made what the action figure was about in the first place, going off with Star Command to other planets, saving the day. Lightyear the movie just throws everything about that all out. It gives us a more serious, brooding human Buzz who's competent from the start but stuck in a repetitive cycle of making the same mistake and learning to move on. And of course creating a future version of Buzz into Zurg that strips everything away that made the characters iconic. It turns everything inward and smaller instead of delivering the bright, epic space adventure the premise promised. It is clear that the director, Angus MacLane, wanted to make a personal sci-fi passion project inspired by the movies he grew up loving, and that's admirable, but you just can't take a beloved name like Buzz Lightyear, attach it to a story that doesn't capture the spirit of the character or franchise, and expect audiences to show up the same way. This highlights also a bigger truth. Pixar is built on doing things that are bright and fun while making colorful, impossible worlds feel possible through human connection and emotion. Think about WALL-E, the film that's already in space, that nails the lonely space traveler angle with stunning visuals, themes of isolation and hope, and an unforgettable emotional core that connects with everyone through a robot and the perspective alongside humans. Lightyear tried to do that similar thing, but without the level of emotional core that WALL-E had it all and just focused on these boring ass humans. Everything in the best Pixar films has a purpose that serves the story and the characters, and here it often felt like the Toy Story connection was just window dressing rather than something that enhanced the experience. In the end, Lightyear just proved you can't make something with a big name attached just because the director has a cool idea for a space movie. No matter how much passion can be poured into it, it just didn't feel like a true Pixar movie the way the main series does each time. That's the key difference driving Toy Story 5's current explosive success. The franchise knows exactly what it is, leans into the heart that made it special, and delivers for the audience that has been there since from the beginning. And so, what are the lessons that Pixar and Disney has seemed to learn after the years of Lightyear? Looking at the films that followed it tell that story clearly. Movies like Elemental, Inside Out 2, and Hoppers all outgrossed Lightyear, some by a massive margin precisely because they leaned into Pixar's strengths. Heartfelt stories, relatable characters, and emotional cores that the audiences could connect with. These weren't just concepts or IP extensions, they felt alive, charming, and purposeful. Inside Out 2 became that billion-dollar success by expanding on beloved characters and diving deeper into the growing up in the way that resonates with families. Hoppers also found huge success by delivering fun, colorful adventure with genuine heart. Even Elemental connected through its immigrant story and beautiful world building through the simple concepts. These films succeeded because they embraced what Pixar does best, making the impossible feel emotional relatable. On the flip side, however, we did see Elio run into the same troubles as Lightyear, another space-themed story that, while not a bad film, film, and in many ways a good one with solid ideas, struggled to excite audiences in the same way of Lightyear. It suffered from that same space movie vibe that had that detachment that didn't quite land, echoing Lightyear's challenges. Both show just because something has a high concept sci-fi hook doesn't mean it will draw crowds if the heart isn't in the front and center. All the while compared to the massive wins of quality sequels. Inside Out 2 and now Toy Story 5 now prove once again that when Pixar delivers on the characters and worlds people already love, the results can be billion-dollar hits. In the past, most major films that they've made that are sequels have increased upon their predecessors. And now 5 is being received with way more excitement and warmth right now, showing the franchise still has that special sparks when it stays true to itself. Lightyear in the end just wasn't the type of movie that was necessary. It wasn't particularly charming or heartwarming in the way Pixar classics are. Its themes and characters just didn't fully connect or go all the way. They felt like a story that maybe shouldn't have existed in that form, or just maybe should have existed on Disney Plus instead of the originals they released on there. You just can't make Buzz Lightyear film without someone like Tim Allen to bring that iconic toy energy, no matter how talented some people like Chris Evans are. And you just can't make a compelling space film that lacks the deep emotional value that we got with something like WALL-E showed and his lonely robot heart. And looking back on it, they had options. Turning Red, for example, probably deserved that big theatrical push more than a Buzz Lightyear spinoff that felt like a director's passion project rather than something audiences were truly asking for, rather than Turning Red that felt more emotionally resonant for people at the time with the core value of its themes. It just backfired all because it prioritized the same name and concept over the soul that makes Pixar special. Ultimately, with what we are seeing with Toy Story 5's success is a reminder that for this franchise and Pixar as a whole, they succeed when they stay true to their heart, what they can do best rather than what they think they should do with big IP. With bright worlds, impossible ideas through real human emotion and connection, that's the thing that made Toy Story work into a cultural phenomenon and keeps thriving even decades later. Lightyear was just truly a learning experience, and it looks like those studios took the lessons to heart. The toys are back where they belong, bringing joys to theaters, and that's something worth celebrating, which never meant again that any of their films were even bad. They just needed a push worth it for infinity and beyond. I'm all done. Goodbye.